The story begins at the edge of the world, where the map of human knowledge once stopped and imagination began. Antarctica, an entire continent carved by ice, sculpted by storms, untouched by humanity for millions of years. Its winds roar louder than hurricanes, its temperatures plunge lower than any place on Earth, and its frozen skin stretches farther than the human eye can see. This is a land where even the planet hesitates, a place so brutally cold and unforgiving that no native human population ever emerged here. Yet, in the dawn of the 20th century, explorers dared to challenge it. They set foot on the last true frontier of Earth, knowing well that the price of failure was death. Among these explorers, one man and his crew would face a test so extreme, so merciless, that their survival would become the greatest story of endurance in human history. Antarctica at the time was a blank space, mysterious, feared, and legendary. Sailors returned with stories of waves as tall as mountains, icebergs that glowed like ghosts, and storms that swallowed ships whole. The frozen continent was the last unsolved puzzle on Earth. But to the men who obsessed over exploration, Antarctica was not just a destination, it was a calling. A place where bravery could be proven, where nations could display dominance, and where names could be etched into the history of human courage. None felt this calling more powerfully than Ernest Shackleton, a man shaped by equal parts ambition, compassion, and an unbreakable will. Shackleton had already attempted to reach the South Pole once. He had come painfully close, only to turn back a mere 97 miles before reaching his goal. But in that moment, he made a choice that defined him. He turned back to save his men rather than push toward glory. "Better a live donkey than a dead lion," he said. And although he never planted a flag at the pole, he earned something far more important, the trust of every man who would ever follow him. Now, years later, Shackleton returned with a grander mission. Not just to reach the pole but to cross the entire continent from sea to sea. It was bold, dangerous, and extraordinary. But to Shackleton, it was necessary. The world was changing, nations were preparing for war, and he believed humanity needed a story of triumph, one final heroic chapter before darkness fell. He assembled a crew unlike any other. Scientists, sailors, carpenters, photographers, mechanics, and seasoned polar veterans. But Shackleton's real gift was seeing into a man's nature. He cared little for flawless resumes. He searched for resilience, humor, discipline, and unbreakable spirit. A grumpy cook could ruin morale more than a broken sled. A cheerful carpenter could lift spirits higher than warm food. Shackleton found men who could laugh in the face of danger, who could stay calm when the ice cracked beneath their feet, who could find hope even when surrounded by endless white emptiness. Their ship was named Endurance, a fitting title for what awaited them. It was a wooden vessel reinforced with massive oak beams, designed to withstand the crushing power of Antarctic ice. Yet even with its strength, the ship seemed fragile compared to the monstrous frozen world ahead. As Endurance sailed south from South Georgia Island, the crew watched the last traces of civilization fade behind them. Ahead lay the Weddell Sea, infamous for its violent pack ice, a floating maze of grinding, drifting blocks large enough to crush ships like toys. The men initially moved with excitement. They photographed penguins, marveled at glacial landscapes, and felt a thrill at being among the few humans ever to witness this world. But the deeper they traveled, the more menacing the ice became. Long slabs of sea ice drifted around them, colliding with deep thunderous cracks. The ship was forced to weave through narrow channels, pushing aside frozen barriers with groans of wooden strain. The temperature dropped, the wind sharpened. The ocean itself began to freeze. Soon, the ship entered a field of pack ice so dense and chaotic that navigation became nearly impossible. Floes, giant patches of sea ice, shifted unpredictably, opening and closing like jaws. The ship nudged one aside only for another to slam into the hull. Hours turned into days. Open water became rare. The ship crawled through the ice at a pace so slow that men could walk faster on foot. One morning, the world changed forever. The temperature plummeted during the night, and by dawn, the Endurance found itself frozen solid, trapped in thick ice like an insect preserved in amber. The crew attempted to cut a path using axes and picks, but the ice was too thick, too vast, too endless. Shackleton realized that they were no longer controlling the expedition, the ice was. The ship would drift with the frozen sea, pulled wherever the winds and currents commanded. The crew adapted quickly. They played soccer on the ice, trained their dogs, hunted seals, repaired equipment, and tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. But beneath the laughter, each man felt the weight of uncertainty. The ice around them creaked and groaned like a living creature. Pressure ridges, giant walls of crushed ice, rose from the surface without warning. Cracks shot across the landscape like lightning. Yet the Endurance held on. Then came October 1915, a day no one on the expedition would ever forget. The ice tightened around the ship with unimaginable force. Massive floes pushed against the sides, squeezing until the hull began to bend. The sound was deafening. Timbers cracking, beams snapping, metal bolts twisting under pressure. The entire ship shuddered violently as the ice lifted it out of the water. Shackleton watched as the hull warped, groaned, and finally split. Water rushed in. There was no hope of saving the ship. The order was given: abandon the Endurance. The men carried supplies, sledges, and lifeboats onto the ice. They watched in silent grief as their beloved ship, their home, their protection, slowly died. Her mast tilted, her decks caved, and at last, the ship disappeared beneath the frozen sea. The world they knew was gone. They were stranded on drifting ice in one of the most hostile places on Earth, with no communication, no rescue, and no way to know where the currents would take them. Yet Shackleton stood calm, unbroken. His eyes were steady, his voice controlled. He told his men, "As long as we are alive, we are not beaten." Those words became the foundation of their survival. The men built camps on the ice, dragging lifeboats across ridges and cracks. They slept in tents that shook violently during storms. The sun circled overhead, never setting, reminding them that Antarctica had no mercy. The ice beneath them drifted northward, slowly, unpredictably. Weeks passed, then months. The ice cracked violently one night, splitting the camp in two. Tents collapsed, dogs panicked, and supplies nearly vanished into the sea. Realizing the ice could fail at any moment, Shackleton made a desperate decision. They would leave the ice and take to the lifeboats. The men loaded everything onto 3 small boats and pushed off into one of the most dangerous oceans on Earth. The waves towered above them, slamming the tiny craft like paper toys. Saltwater froze instantly on their clothes. Food was scarce, sleep was impossible, but after days of torture, the men spotted land, Elephant Island, a barren rock covered in ice and lashed by endless storms. It was the first solid ground they had stood on in over a year. Yet it was far from salvation. No ship passed that isolated island. No whalers visited. No rescue could find them. Shackleton made his boldest decision yet. He would take a small crew and sail across 1,300 kilometers of the world's worst ocean to reach South Georgia Island and bring help. It was a journey that even powered ships feared. Shackleton would attempt it in a 22-foot lifeboat. He chose 5 men, strong, skilled, and loyal. They strengthened the boat, named it the James Caird, using makeshift tools. Then they set off into the monstrous South Atlantic. Waves rose taller than buildings. Winds screamed. Their clothes were soaked for weeks. They navigated with a single compass, using glimpses of the sun through clouds. They bailed water constantly to avoid sinking. They froze, starved, prayed, fought, and pushed forward. Against every law of nature, Shackleton's tiny boat reached South Georgia. But the struggle was not over. The men landed on the wrong side of the island, separated from help by an impenetrable mountain range no human had ever crossed. Shackleton and 2 others climbed the icy mountains, marched across glaciers, navigated deadly cliffs, and hiked non-stop for 36 hours until they finally reached a whaling station. Their beards were frozen, their bodies broken, their clothes in tatters. But they were alive. The whalers gasped when they recognized him. Shackleton wasted no time. He immediately began planning the rescue of his men still stranded on Elephant Island. Storms blocked him again and again. Ice prevented ships from approaching. But he did not stop. He refused to eat properly, refused to rest, refused to accept any possibility except bringing back every single man alive. On his 4th attempt, Shackleton broke through the ice. He scanned the beach anxiously through binoculars. Smoke rose. A figure waved a shirt on a stick. Then another, and another. Every man Shackleton left behind had survived. Not a single life lost. The journey had taken nearly 2 years. They had endured starvation, storms, crushing ice, freezing oceans, and unimaginable isolation. But they returned as a living testament to what human will can achieve when everything else has failed. The survival of the Endurance crew remains unmatched in history, not because of good luck, but because of leadership, unity, and an unbreakable refusal to surrender. Antarctica had unleashed its full fury. Nature had thrown its deadliest weapons. Yet Shackleton and his men endured every blow. Their story echoes across time, proving that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. In the coldest, driest, harshest place on Earth, a group of men showed the world that the limits of human endurance are far beyond what anyone had imagined. Antarctica tried to break them. Instead, they became legends.